Hello, and welcome back to the next frontiers of AI, where we explore the strategies, the innovations, and the real-world stories shaping the future of enterprise AI. I'm Scott Hebner, your host, principal analyst at AI for theCUBE Research. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is about staying current with where AI is truly heading, because unlike past technology cycles, this one is moving at warp speed. And if you fall too far behind, you may never catch up. In my 35 years watching technology cycles going all the way back to the client server days, I've never seen anything with such transformative power or the potential for disruption than what I've seen with AI. We're entering the golden age of AI agents, and it isn't just another tech cycle, it's a workforce cycle, a human capability cycle. AI isn't just about automation or doing things faster or being more productive. That's just a starting point. It's about digital labor, giving people new superpowers to create, to reason, to solve complex problems, and to make better decisions. And as I have always said, organizations don't do things, people do. And the promise of AI is about amplifying what people can do cognitively. Over the next 5 years, this shift will fundamentally change how businesses operate, create value, and engage the world. Yet too many leaders are still sitting in the dugout. They're watching, they're waiting, they're studying, they're thinking. Yet the game is played on the field. So it's not that surprising that the AI value gap is widening. But what matters most now is how to close it before it's too late. And we couldn't have a better guest from a better company to dive deeper into this topic. And he comes armed with a new study involving 1,250 global senior executives and AI decision makers across 9 industries in more than 25 sectors. It's a goldmine of insights. So with that, I'm thrilled to be joined by Vladimir Lukic. He is the global leader of tech and digital advantage practice at Boston Consulting Group. And he's going to help us unpack all of this. So how's it goes it?
It's great. Good to see you, Scott.
It's good to see you too, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I assume you're up in Boston?
I'm up in Boston. Travels kept me home today, which is great. It's rare, but I'm excited.
That's good. It's starting to get cold, certainly
Yes.
here in Connecticut. All right, well, let's start with some background. Your background. Could you just tell us a little bit about your personal journey that led you to where you are now at the Boston Consulting Group, and a little bit about the Widening AI Value Gap study that you and your colleagues just put out?
Yeah, so happy to. So I've been with BCG for 20 years. I started our analytics team some 15 years ago with a number of my colleagues that we've incubated from essentially zero to now over 5,000 colleagues that are data scientists, data engineers, architects, full stack developers, folks that build and deploy AI systems at scale. So it was a fascinating journey from like being few folks in the corner that were hiding and figuring out how to get budgets to get a server to build some of the solutions to now really being the team that we are, trying to turbocharge even more and scale even more of a large size. And boy, what a journey it has been. And to your question now, in parallel to that, we've been studying companies that deploy digital and tech, and now more recently, labeling as AI technology. And there's some interesting patterns that we've been picking up on. One is that there's still only 5% of the companies that have figured out their tech infrastructure and how to deploy it at scale and have results to show for. And that doesn't mean others haven't been trying, right? But it's not the easiest thing to pull off. And the other interesting thing that is important for everyone to be cognizant of, if those 5% that have figured it out are delivering results that are outsized compared to the peers, and the gap is widening. And it's starting to become harder and harder to catch up with them. And like the silly thing I keep using is, for you to have 5 years of data that's quality data, you still need those 5 years. So if you didn't start on the journey, you will always need those 5 years to get to that relevant data set, right? And the leaders have really leaned in a while ago, and they're now just starting to compound their advantage, and it's starting to bear out in all the data we're looking at.
Yeah, and I guess that's the title of the study, right? The Widening AI
Yep.
value gap. And before we dive into the details of that, because I think we want to get into it, much deeper than 5% is a very small number, obviously, for what 3 or 4 years of at least generative AI, and then going before that with predictive models. But I always like to start with some of the good news, and I found some encouraging news, I think, in the study as I read through it, around agentic AI. And what you found is there's a lot of belief that it is going to really expand the value that people can get out of their investments in AI. And let me bring up a chart here that I pulled from the study. Maybe you can explain it a little bit for our audience.
Yes, so I would like one can debate the words, etc., right? But what we're seeing in the study when we roughly try to break the use cases that are being deployed, and we try to break them between predictive, traditional, classic AI, prescriptive optimization models that are used for scheduling, pricing, etc. 45% of the companies would say that value will come from those, right? Today. 38% of them say it's going to come more from the generative AI things, so our chat GPTs that we use, or there's a number of tools used in different that cover different mediums, and that would be the next wave. And then only 17% would say the value will be coming from the agentic deployments, which is more integrated workflows, or both generative and predictive are pulled together into more end-to-end automated plays. Right now, as we look forward, the obvious trend and where the money is going is that people will be, as they put in place all the components they need around predictive and generative, will be evolving more towards more agentic plays, and they really believe that the value unlocks will be happening from deploying those. That would be at a rough level how I would describe it.
Yeah, one of the things I love about what you did on that chart in the study is that you broke out, predictive versus generative versus agentic. And, with the engagements I do, and have been doing a ton of them over the last couple of years, I sense some confusion about the difference between those. And I see a lot of people out there saying they're building AI agents and they're building agentic workflows, yet they're relying solely on generative AI. And I'm not so sure that's truly possible. It may be a good starting point, because you really do got to build around generative AI. Generative AI is sort of like the gateway into the world of AI, right? Sort of like the browser used to be the gateway into the internet some 25 years ago. For enterprises, they got to build around it to get specialized capabilities. And so could you just give us a little bit of your thoughts on how you differentiate generative versus predictive versus agentic?
Yeah. Perfect. And like you described it really well. Like it's interesting. We just did a separate study for one of the clients where we've asked them, actually for one of the tech players, asking several hundred tech leaders what is the volume of agentic AI that they have deployed versus generative AI, more of using the apps, right? And when they look at their use cases, and they said that 40% of what they're deploying is actually agentic AI, agent AIs, right? And so we asked them then to describe what is actually what they've done. And then when we've deciphered it, a lot of it was like just they built a little GPT for themselves. And for them, that was magical and agentic, right? So when we took those out, the real number was really in the 5 to 10%, right? So to your point, I would say 80% of use cases out there that people describe as agents really are just small usages of the tool that exists, either from the predictive, it's a feature in their favorite core piece of software, or it is a feature or a set of steps that they've automated in their favorite LLM or Gen AI tool that they call agentic. So that's the mystique out there. And like when you de-average for that, numbers look much more as what we've shown on this slide. But that's kind of as the backdrop to just underscore your point on the confusion that's out there, which is fine. Because there's a lot of folks who the Gen AI was an entry into the wonders of AI, right? And to your point, is the user interface through which they can start engaging. But once you get into the deployments, the agentic AI really is the combo of all of those things, right? It is steps that are done by the traditional software tools in a prescriptive way with known answers, yes or no, and very precise steps that then usually human interpreted, and based on that suggested some next steps, which now you can actually put Gen AI in to do. And then the human triggered the next step, which was also usually prescriptive executable set of steps, which now Gen AI can trigger, right? If you let it do that. And so the combo of those two ends up creating these agentic workflows. Somewhere it's also triggering an robo process automation step, right? RPA step that is pulling on some of the existing rules that exist. But the combo of all of those is usually a Gen AI or AI agent. And the human control there is deciding on the degrees of freedom that we let the engine to make the final decision and trigger the next action, and which is fully in the human control. And that's where I see a lot of companies are kind of struggling with figuring out what is the level of that automation and independence they're going to allow into the agents. Does that resonate? Does that help?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's very consistent with my point of view on it. I mean, I think a generative AI and LLMs basically have created the notion of an assistant where it can help individuals, it can help people be more productive in automating tasks, whether it be creating content or provisioning a piece of software or something like that. But Agentic kind of, an AI agent kind of gets you into the world of more of a collaborative partner where it's helping you kind of reason and, figure out root cause and, problem solve and make decisions. And it becomes a little bit more of a collaborative partner to do knowledge work and things of that nature, which means you need more than just an LLM. As things like chain of thought are starting to come out there. There's knowledge graphs. You mentioned the ability to integrate with RPA and other systems. And I think we got to keep pushing this. Then I think agentic AI is when you start wiring all that together into a collaborative workflow, right?
Correct.
I think we got to be, people that are in our positions, particularly you guys, is keep reinforcing that agentic AI needs to mean something. And I think it does. And, obviously we're in the early days, so there might be a little bit of confusion around that. But, and I think the way you framed it in the report is right on, right? It was very clear what the value is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Well, let's kind of move into the gap, because I'm going to get into this in much more detail. And let's start with the big picture here. As you pointed out before, your global study showed that despite years and years of investment, only 5% of companies are capturing real measurable value from AI. So tell us a little bit about what's behind the gap. And I'm going to bring up what I consider to be one of the summary charts in your report that kind of sets the framework or sets the context for the rest of what we'll talk about.
Yeah. So listen, I would when we talk about the companies, what we found is they self-assessed on the components of their AI muscle, and that means, is our data ready? Do we have the right plumbing and systems in place, right? Do we have the right infrastructure in place? Do we have the right operating model, right, to do things the right way, etc. And within that, also a number of questions around how much do they spend on IT budgets, on tech budgets, how much do they spend on those capabilities? And there are a few interesting things that came out, which was when we looked in 2024, which is what you see on the left-hand side, those companies that were higher indexed on those points, so they had higher level of sophistication on the data, on the tech infrastructure, on the operating model, etc., had 3 to 5 times higher results, either in the revenue increase or on the reduction of the cost, which is what you see on the left-hand side, versus the laggards. And then when we moved over to 2028, we see that gap is still there. They are delivering much higher increases in revenues, and they're delivering much higher reductions on the cost side. And what you see in the middle is what explains a lot of it. On average, companies typically spend 5% of their total revenues on IT budgets. When we looked at those future build companies, they spent 25 to 50% more on IT budgets than the laggards, right? And on average, they spend 100% plus more on AI-related initiatives. So they're investing money, but we're also seeing results are directly following, right? So you need to commit to the motion and you need to actually spend on it in a very focused way. The other pattern that doesn't emerge on the page is they spent more, but they focused on fewer things. So they were much more surgically focused on where the value is, and then they stuck with those plays for much longer. So those are a few insights that are coming out now when we look at it through time.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty compelling case. And you're right, you got to spend to invest. It's the whole idea that the game's played in the field, not in the dugout, right?
Correct. There you go. Yes.
And I do think that, you kind of alluded to this, that, you got to be careful. Unlike cloud and maybe mobile and client server and, all the things, the internet, e-business, there was okay to sit back and kind of understand what's happening, what I can do. But today, man, you might fall behind, not catch up, because everything's so rapid. So I got another chart that I really liked, that I was intrigued with, that kind of talks about the future built cohorts, not just investing more in AI, but the way they're actually deploying AI driven workflows, and the fact that they're able to scale that, double, right? And I'll bring that chart up for you to kind of provide some commentary on. I found this really interesting because, again, this goes to our discussion a couple of minutes ago about generative versus agentic, right? These guys seem to be putting in the AI into the context of the workflow, and they're having success, and they're learning, and then therefore able to do things even quicker, right?
Yep. And this is like they build a muscle, and this is essentially take a pipeline of use cases and say, let's say both you and I have 100 use cases in our pipeline, right? And you're future built and I'm a laggard. What you would see in my pipeline is the bottom part of this. Well, we're talking about 23, but we're not doing anything. We have 34 that we've planned around, and we are starting to think about what we do. We're piloting around 30 of them. We are scaling only 11, and we only have one that's fully deployed. On my end. On your end, for those 100, like there's only 3 left in the pipeline of not being adopted, right? And we're planning only for 8. We're so farther along in the funnel where you've already deployed 20, you're scaling now 40. And so it just shows you how much more mature they are. And it takes a while to go through this. And then the trick is, as you move more to the right, there is more learning. So you get even better at thinking through what gets in the pipeline and how to do the planning the right way. So they're further along on the journey, and they're incorporating those lessons, and it just takes a while, right? I have a number of clients that have deployed some solutions. They built them, took them 18 months, and then software company released it as a feature in their tool, and they're like, that's okay, because we just changed the processes, we got the data ready, we can now use this tool, right? We would have still needed those 18 months to be able to use it, right? So they're compounding that advantage.
Yeah, and that's a virtuous cycle I think you guys talk about, which is you start to nail the techniques, you get the code, you get the experience, you're building the skills, you fuel that with the fast pace of new innovations coming on the market, and then you're able to adopt those quicker. And that's the notion of the warp speed, and being careful that, if you enter too late, you're going to find yourself at a very distinct competitive disadvantage and may not be able to catch up. And I think the 5% statement, which I think MIT came out with something similar.
Very similar numbers, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we've seen it in some of the stuff we've done too, where, getting the value out of it is tough in the enterprise. Beyond individual productivity, I mean, all the good things that generative AI does, and a lot of these companies have had predictive models for a while, but it's moving so quickly now, and so much investments going in across the world on new innovations. It's going to be fascinating as this thing moves forward in time here.
Correct.
So the punchline, I think, of the whole thing, again, I'm taking that from my read on it, was it suggested that companies that have actual shared business IT ownership are far more likely to get the results they want. And that alignment is so critical. In other words, it's, Lou Gerstner at IBM, when he kind of did the turnaround a long time ago, said something like, I thought culture was part of the game, but it turned out to be the entire game, right? There's a lot of organizational transformation that has to happen to make this all successful. And I think this chart in your report kind of, and I took 2 charts and put them on one, hopefully that was okay. But I think you make a couple great points here on the left about people and organization and process being 70% of the game to be successful. And then, you can talk through the other side. And I actually have some data from our Agentic AI Futures Index that supports, I think, your point here. But I'll let you make the point first and explain it.
No, the point is like what you say in the middle here. When we move from companies that are in the stagnating motion to the ones that are future built, the biggest difference is that this is not an IT project, and it's not something that you hide in your business budget to just do as a shadow investment. It is when the two teams are equally owning it and driving it, right? And it truly becomes a business-led, tech-supported at scale motion that is rewiring the culture of the firm, right? And it's not a one-off thing. So this is an extremely powerful message that I do think all the leaders need to absorb.
Yeah, 1.5, that's a pretty big multiplier. And if you start thinking out a little bit and we start evolving beyond just the agentic technology and what you can do with it, you start thinking with the mindset of digital labor, digital labor transformation, integrated workforces. People like Mark Benioff at Salesforce saying that he's going to be the last leader to manage a human-only workforce. And you start thinking in that context, it's like, okay, so how do you not have the business units involved, HR involved, right? You have to have your risk and compliance organizations involved, and it can't be just an IT-led initiative, correct?
Correct. And that's the big shift, right? Because a lot of companies that are in that step before, they're in the scaling, but do not become truly AI future built, is exactly that. They might have started with a business, but then they're saying, okay, now it's IT's thing to scale it and manage it. And then they abandon it. And a lot of these things just die because it's not in the budget. It's not spec'd in. And so if it's not jointly managed, then we jointly make the interventions in the process, it doesn't fly. Right. So that is a very obvious set of statements, but it's important for people not to ignore.
So we ran, not as comprehensive, obviously, as yours, but we ran what we called the Agentic AI Futures Index. It was 625 pre-qualified AI business and technology professionals. It was in UK, Canada, United States, spanned 13 industries. And let me show you one of the questions and one of the answers here that I think supports what you just said here. So which part of your organization will be primarily accountable for implementing digital labor strategies? There was a similar question using agentic AI instead of digital labor, and it was pretty much the same answer here. But look at this, right, Vlad? It's 65% is IT and app dev. Another 20% is your AI team or your data science. Only 8% said it was shared, cross-functional, center of excellence, a board. That's startling.
I mean, this explains that only 5% get it right? Because even this tells you that only 8% of them are even focused on getting it right? And by definition, like this is what drives the outcome that we're seeing, right? They're focused on, like, I build data science teams and data engineers. That is the core of what I do. You don't ask that team to go and deploy Gen AI tools. Like they're never going to let any of them get on the shop floor because like I am proud that my team will deliver tools that are 99.9% accurate and precise. They don't go and deploy Gen AI tool that's only 70% right and hallucinates 30% of the time. No way that ever makes it to the shop floor. Forget about the fact that humans make it right only 50% of the time. So like if you focus on the wrong team to deploy stuff, it's just not going to happen, right? And so this data also nicely underscores one of the root causes of why this stuff is not scaling up and making it to the front lines as fast as it should, and it could.
Yeah, and you had some data in there too, I think, if I remember correctly, on CAIOs, right? The chief AI officers or the equivalent. More and more companies putting that in. And I've heard I have some good conversations with quite a few firms and end user customers about the CAIO evolving over time to sort of also taking on the role as the digital HR.
Yes.
In
By the
partnership
way,
with
like since you and I talked and since that was published, like I talked with a CIO who said, I'm now CIO and CHRO together, and we've changed my title from CIO to CIO. I said, okay, well, what does that mean? And he said, I used to be Chief Information Officer. I'm now Chief Intelligence Officer. Now, it has the military connotations, but if we can put that aside, like he's like, I'm here to combine the human and the AI together into a new intelligence and to drive the firm forward. And I'm seeing more and more of that mindset being proliferated, which is also kind of brings to life the whole point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me put what I just showed you in context. And in the index that we did, we had these maturity indexes, right? So
yep.
If you look at aspiration, so this was a set of questions around, the rise of digital labor, right? And it was 73% either strongly agreed or agreed that there'll be like one question was about, are you do you agree with the statement that you're going to be the last to manage a human-only workforce? And there were other related questions. So it was a 4.1, which is kind of high, right?
Yep.
And actually, I guess it was 71% said it was inevitable. That was the agree or strongly agree. When you look at strategy, the other thing I found interesting here is the strategy, to your point earlier about the evolution of generative AI to agentic AI, is that it's now more about knowledge workers, where people that need to make judgments and they need to make decisions and they're trying to plan things, and they need that assistance to do that more effectively, faster, more accurately, right? So they're prioritizing the future, and this is the next 18 months was the question, to kind of build out that kind of knowledge worker kind of capabilities, not just task automation or not just workflow automation, but infuse, as you said, intelligence, which is maybe what a chief intelligence officer does, because that always involves humans and agents.
Yep.
But then the question you just saw on the previous chart I showed, then you look at execution and it's 1.8. So basically what you got here is a huge gap between aspiration and vision, starting to put a strategy together, which is good. But then when it comes to execution, it ain't going to work, as you said, because if it's just your IT organization that's driving all that stuff. So
correct. I love when
yeah.
the data supports the conversation, right? It's
Yeah.
exactly that. That's exactly what's going on.
In two different surveys, right? And I know you guys, as we do too, but you're probably on definitely on a much bigger scale, talking to a lot of real customers, right, that are doing things.
And the magic will be in those who manage to turbocharge the humans, right, and give them the new superpowers in an effective way.
Exactly. Versus just say, hey, you can create content better, or whatever.
Correct.
All right, cool. Well, look, before we wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about where this is all heading. Looking ahead here as agentic AI becomes a larger and larger share of the investment and of the enterprise value, as you pointed out. What would be your advice on, if you were looking out a year or 2 years, what are the key things that leaders that want to stay ahead of the curve, or at least keep up with the curve, should be looking at, both in terms of technologies, best practices, maybe start with your state. Like, what would we be talking about 2 years from now if we did this again?
Yeah, listen, well, the first point is like don't wait. Like, this is a wave coming at you. So take the surfboard, go out there. It's hard to learn to surf, but once you learn it, you can actually be on it. But it takes a while of trial and error, and you gotta, and then the waves are gonna come and go, right? But you need to commit to the motion of doing that as a craft. The gap widens, and the advantages compound as you lean in here. So the best time to start is now, right? Because you just need to start building a muscle, commit to it as a motion versus a project, right? And you will figure out the kinks. You will start asking the right questions, etc. But a lot of the folks ask very advanced questions up front, and they never get started because of that, right? They're very simple, low-hanging fruit here you can do to start deploying this technology in everyday operations. We can then start building the common knowledge and the right operating model. So that would be the key message: get started. And then if I look out 2-3 years, I genuinely don't know. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff that will be unlocked with now quantum computing. There will be a lot of new things that will be unlocked with physical AI, where we are putting a lot of those brains onto the physical devices. So there will be new moments 2 years from now that will be different set of buzzwords that we will be dealing with, but the underlying motion and the commitment to the operating model and augmenting humans with this is what's going to remain. So I think we would have similar themes then, but just the tech might be a different one. That's the trigger for it.
Yeah. My take on all this is, if I was thinking of themes, it would be bold, right? Prioritize trust. People only use things they trust, and particularly if you're doing knowledge work. Think with a digital labor sort of mindset, a co-worker mindset, because ultimately these things need to work in partnership with people, not just, a SaaS application where people, And then, get out of the dugout, man. Start doing stuff, start experimenting, really take close looks at things like you produced with your study and what other people are doing. And just be aware
Get
that,
moving, get on the field, right?
yeah. Otherwise, you can run yourself into some problems here. One last quick question, and I've been getting a lot of pings on this, mental pings on just what I'm seeing out there. And our study kind of showed this too, where there seems to be a shift as you look 18 months out to more and more investment on things that would be classified as reasoning, AI reasoning and decision intelligence. Things like decision traceability, knowledge graphs for semantic layers, causality, causal AI, causal inference, things of that nature that really start getting you into the game of not just predicting what the right decision is and predicting how to explain it, but actually having more knowledge and decision intelligence in these agents. Do you see that coming? Do you hear
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
for sure.
of that?
That's a natural progression, right? It goes back to the beginning. Like the degree to which we let them act on that is where the difference is going to be, right? And some companies will have a higher tolerance versus lower, but it's moving in that direction, right? Of them be able to connect those dots faster and having a stronger point of view, right? If you will, and then acting on it. For now, still human is the one that will interpret that. I think we're going to see progressively companies letting go control where they've seen the effectiveness be in place. Yeah, but that is for me a natural progression.
Yeah, one of the data points in the survey we did was, I think it was around 31% want to pursue, like for example, causal knowledge graphs and things that sort of understand cause and effect and consequences, and you can do what if analysis and all that kind of stuff. But when asked if there were platforms delivered and tools delivered that really made it easier to do that, would you prioritize it higher? And it jumped up to 47%. So I think a lot of this has to do with people like making it easy, because some of the stuff gets really hard, right?
Yep.
For every day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Vlad. Well, look, this brings us to the end of our time. Thanks so much for being here. Great insights and really great work on the study. To you and your colleagues, I know a bunch of you guys collaborate on that. It was a really, really great study, and like you guys always put out. So again, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it on behalf of the team. Thank you.
You bet. And the key takeaway, I think, for our audience here is clear. If only 5% of companies are truly realizing the value of AI and they're pulling ahead, these future built companies kind of have their finger on the right approach here, right? And it's not just about investing more, it's about reimagining how work gets done, having bold leadership, having the shared organizations that are driving all that. And I think they're inspiring, right? I think they're giving us the road into the future.
Yep.
So anyhow, to dive deeper on what we were talking about, make sure you go out to BCG's website and get the full report, the Widening AI Value Gap. It's a great read. And also, you can check out through me and our site, the AI Futures Index, the Agentic AI Futures Index, that provides some additional information and data sources. I think altogether, it's giving you a good roadmap on where this is all heading. And make sure you subscribe to the Next Frontiers of AI podcast. We'll continue to explore where this is all heading in the future. Until next time, I'm Scott Hebner. See you again soon. Take care, everybody. Really appreciate you being here.